Open, outspoken, it's ophthalmology off the grid, an honest look at controversial topics in the field. I'm Blake Williamson.
Welcome to a new episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid's Survive and Thrive series. In this podcast, Dr. Blake Williamson invites a panel of Drs. Brenton Finklea, Rahul Tonk, Camila Albo, and Mike Zein to share advice for ophthalmology resident applicants as the match approaches. Hear insights from both sides of the interview table. Support for this podcast comes from Bryn Mawr Communications. BMC produces a number of informative podcast series spanning a variety of topics in ophthalmology. Discover a new show at itube.net/podcasts.
Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive, which is the sub-series of the Ophthalmology Off the Grid podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Blake Williamson. Really happy to be here tonight for this very topical episode of Survive and Thrive. And it's all about how to approach the match. We know that this is coming up very soon. And there's a lot of residents out there who are soon to be residents who are applying for the match and want to get into ophthalmology. So what are some tips and tricks for that? What do they need to be thinking throughout their interview process, and so on and so forth? So we thought that we'd kind of take this in sort of from a few different approaches and a few different viewpoints, both those who have recently matched from within here in the United States, as well as international med grads. And then also those who are on the other side of the table, those who are looking at some of the applicants, whether it be in fellowship or residency, and either work at institutions, academic institutions, or affiliated with that. So I think we're going to have a wide range of perspective and have a lot of pearls for those of you who are hoping for good news here coming up. So I thought that we'd kind of start with introducing our guest. We'll start with Brent and Rahul, and then Mike and Camila.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Blake. So my name is Brent Finklea. I am in practice in Philadelphia. I'm in private practice, but I'm on staff at Wills Eye, where I work for the cornea department, work with the cornea fellows, and then also run the global health department at Wills Eye, where we have a 2-fellow global ophthalmology fellowship program. So happy to bring some perspective, but thanks so much for having me tonight.
Great. And I'm Rahul Tonk. I practice out of Bascom Palmer, where I do cornea, cataract, and refractive. And I finished my residency in Albany, New York in 2016, and then my cornea fellowship in 2017. So I've been practicing about 5 years, so kind of remember some of what it's been like to go through. And I now have the privilege to co-direct a cornea fellowship. So also understand what it's like to be on this side of the table and how talented so many of the applicants are, and just try to give advice and mentorship where I can to help people represent themselves in the best way possible.
And I'm Mike Zein, and I am a international medical graduate, completed my medical school in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. This was followed by a master's in vision science and a combined corneal research fellowship at the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute. And I'm currently a PGY1 at the Cook County Department of Ophthalmology.
Hi, everyone. I'm Camila Albo. I completed my medical school at the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University in Augusta, Georgia, and I am now a PGY1 ophthalmology resident at UT Health San Antonio. Great to be here with you all.
Okay, so Camila, you and Mike are the closest to what everybody is going through right now, all the nerves and everything like that. Take me through, these last few weeks building up to the match. Camila, maybe start with you and then Mike chime in. What are the emotions going through their minds? What kind of advice do you have for them? What can you do at this late stage if you haven't done already? And sort of walk us through that.
So many great questions. I just want to start off by encouraging everyone that's going through the process right now. Mike and I are just 1 year out. So we're really just a little further ahead in the spectrum of time. And I'm even so encouraged talking with you all right now on this podcast, thinking about where we can be in the future, looking up to so many amazing people in the field. So right now, thinking back to a few weeks before applying, the application will be due around September 1st. I remember feeling nervous and excited, so many emotions, and just getting everything together. And then the next big step is approaching interview season, waiting for interview invitations around October, going through the interviews in November, December, early January, and then approaching the match. So as far as taking it one day at a time is what I really encourage. And if I could give you, I think, one main piece of advice, it's to not be afraid to be yourself. I really encourage you to let your passions shine. I think going into interview season, people sometimes get nervous. They are nervous about being judged, about being measured up against others, but it's an amazing chance to tell your story, and your story is so powerful. So getting to share what makes you tick, what your passions are, your aspirations. Ultimately, I think we are naturally hardwired to resonate with stories. People love a good story and having that human connection. So when you're talking with your interviewers, just be yourself, share what makes you you and what you're excited about going into ophthalmology, and you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Camila. I mean, like she said, you want to take it one day at a time. And around now, where there's only 2 weeks left until application is submitted, there's not much that you can really change in your application. And at this point, you want to focus on what you have and what makes you tick. Specifically, you want to kind of really, you've probably already worked on this for most of the last couple of months, crafting your narrative, but you really want to have that ingrained in your mind. So programs, when they're interviewing you, they can see that shine right through. Also, you also want to lean on your support system, whether that's your mentors, your colleagues, your peers. I mean, you should be proud of yourself at this point, that the fact that you're even applying, I think that in itself is an achievement, because to even get your application to that stage where you are eligible to apply, I think you've done so much to reach this point that you should just be proud of yourself and be kind to yourself. And similar to the point about leaning on your support system, I don't know if anyone thinks this, but I wouldn't think of anyone as competition. These are all going to be your future colleagues, and together you can achieve more. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but you want to really bounce ideas off each other, practice interviews together, start to think about how you want to be viewed by your colleagues going forward. I know it might be a little presumptuous to say before you've even matched, but if you get into that mindset, then I think you can kind of make what's going to be a very turbulent couple of months a little more less turbulent, the more smooth sailing, shall we say. So definitely at this point, you want to focus on what makes you you, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. Talk to your mentors, strategize a plan about how you're going to make this a successful season, lean into your colleagues, and yeah, best of luck to you.
Good feedback. And Rahul, you're kind of on the other side of the table here at a world famous place, and you're going to be seeing applicants from all over the place who are all amazing, I bet. I'm curious about two things about the step one. Is that still a thing? That went to pass fail, didn't? I'm curious if that, because that used to be a big differentiator. And I'm also curious about sort of the away rotation thing. That was always a question whenever I was applying, was like, should you do it or should you not? Does it help you or hurt you? I guess it depends. What's the current state of the step one thing, and how is that, if it is pass fail, then what do you have to go on? And then what do you think about the away rotation thing? And I guess that might be something people are leading up to.
Yeah, great questions. And, just to kind of piggyback first on what Mike and Camila were saying, I think that, representing yourself in a good way, whether it's on an away rotation, whether it's on paper, whether it's through your support system reaching out pre or post interview, letting us know of your interest and what makes you great, I think is probably the most important thing. I want to take kind of a contrarian view a little bit, because I think people are very keen to present themselves in the best possible light. And I just want to also caution against the things that are red flags from a residency program or fellowship program director perspective, things that would make me say, geez, I would think twice before I'm going to look at this application. And if there's anything that feels to you in your heart as a stretch that you're saying about yourself, just don't say it. You've probably got enough other accomplishments to put it on paper. If there's a story that's not quite true, or is it a stretch of the imagination in your personal statement, don't sell it with flowery language. It's not true. It's not what's necessary for your personal statement. There's so much that happens to good applicants that they do just out of a sense that they've got to make a perfect application that ends up taking them out of contention, just because we worry about whether or not they're authentic and whether they'll be authentic and trustworthy and true when they're here in person. To speak specifically to the step one question, I believe that it'll still be on the applications this year. I don't think the pass fail has come through yet. Am I right on that, Mike and Camila? So I would say that there are some centers that will use that as a cutoff to say that, we don't start looking at applications above a certain threshold, just because of the volume of applications that come in. So you have to imagine that everybody that's reviewing these applications is doing so on a voluntary basis. They have full-time practices in most cases, and they're doing this on nights and weekends instead of playing with their kids. So there are some rough cutoffs sometimes that happen in some programs. We don't use that for the most part. I think that many of the other programs don't use that for the most part, but I know that there are some that do, at least below a certain level. But there are plenty of other things that can make up for poor step one scores, and I'm sure we can expound on that as the evening goes on.
What do you think, Brent? So you look at applications, I think mostly for fellowships for Wills, but it's still kind of the same idea. One thing that Rahul talked about was authenticity, and man, like no one's dumb here. Like everyone can sniff out, if you have an ounce of social awareness, like you can sniff out if someone's not being authentic. And unfortunately, like, if you say some story about someplace you've been, chances are someone that on that panel has been there too, and they may ask you something and call you out. Like if you don't speak Mandarin, don't say you speak Mandarin. You know what I mean? Because someone probably does speak Mandarin at Wills. So maybe talk about some things that really kind of shine for you when you're looking at applications and so forth.
Absolutely, a lot of great points have already been brought up, and the key to authenticity absolutely. Doesn't just end at putting truthful statements on your application, but also presenting your most truthful self. In terms of mentioning specific traits or certain skill sets that you have on your application that may or may not be completely accurate or completely truthful, there are many interviewers that will ask you about them and ask you to demonstrate. If you are a singer, they might even ask you to hum a few bars. If they find out that you are a world-class whistler, guess what? You're going to be performing for the group. So, make sure that you're ready to back up with actions what you put down in words. One quick thing I wanted to actually backtrack on that Mike had said that I think is so important is ophthalmology is an extremely small community. And that community that you build starts from the moment that you enter the applicant pool, and it continues throughout the entire duration of your practice. It is remarkable how many people I met on the interview trail now 8, 9, 10 years ago, somewhere in that range, that I still know, that I still see at meetings, that I still reach out to when I have problems or want to know about applicants from other programs and that sort of thing. So these are very, very valuable friendships, and just it's the first step that you have in building your career path and building your professional group. So I think that all of those are extremely important. In terms of what Rahul was mentioning about presenting yourself on the interview day, I think that you need to not only have all of your skill sets ready to roll and have all of your discussion points ready, but you need to be ready to just be an open, honest, and friendly individual. There are a lot of smart people that are applying to these fellowships and to these residency programs, and that's not really what differentiates you. We're not looking for the 0.1% out of the 0.3%. What we're looking for is somebody that we are going to be able to trust, that we're going to be able to rely on, and that we're going to be able to lean on with our patients and with our hospital for those 3 years that you're going to be with us. To that point also, Blake, you mentioned away rotations. I think, Blake, I think away rotations are a very valuable thing that you can do, especially as we look into a future where USMLE scores and some other objective metrics may not necessarily be as closely vetted or may not even be available. And so if you are somebody who naturally presents yourself well, who makes a good first impression, and you know if you do or you don't, if you are a good first impression person, you are probably somebody who should consider doing an away rotation at a stretch school, not just your safety school. I know many of my colleagues who managed to find their way into very competitive residency programs through these away rotations. And so I would definitely encourage our applicants to pursue them for their most coveted spots.
Yeah, Mike, Camila, what did you guys do any aways? Is that still a thing right now, or is it too late to do an away? Do they already have to do that? I'm trying to figure out if this is relevant right now, or if they were going to do an away rotation, would they have already done it by now, or is that upcoming?
It is very relevant. I think Mike and I can both speak to this. I know we have some friends who, I have one that I just messaged before this asking about questions he has, and he's doing an away rotation right now. I remember away rotations going through September, I believe, maybe October. And students usually applied a few months ago, but I think there may always be an opportunity perhaps to rotate. I really encourage students to just reach out to programs directly if they have a very strong interest. They may have already done that at this point, but being able to make that great first impression on an away rotation is critical. I actually did my away rotation here at UT Health San Antonio, where I matched and I'm doing my PGY 1 year, and I had an amazing experience. It was a blast. And I think what I learned from that experience, and advice also I give for everyone going through the process right now, is that I think people truly are what make a program so special. When you find people that you can rely on, you can build each other up, support one another, roll up your sleeves and work hard during busy clinic days and call days. What Dr. Finklea mentioned also is so true. It's, I think, the intangibles that set you apart. It's the things that you don't learn from a book. It's helping out your co-residents, the team, taking extra patients, offering to help out your residents in any way that you can, just getting to know people on a genuine level. And that's just being vulnerable and honest to who you are. I think those are easy things that you can do to really stand out during an away rotation.
And Camila, you probably meet some people, doing these away rotations and things that aren't very nice. If you could just go rank for us the meanest programs that you interviewed at, and if you can give some names of the professors that were mean, that would be great. Maybe not right now, but think about that at the end of the podcast. We'll come back to it. No, I'm kidding.
I may plead the fifth.
Yeah, Mike.
But no, everyone was amazing.
So Mike, let's just say that you have a great application. And maybe you have your picker programs, right? So maybe you're somebody who feels like pretty confident that they're gonna get a lot of interviews and they're probably gonna match. It's just a question of where. How do you evaluate different programs? Like what do you look for? Whenever I went through, for me, it was like, well, gosh, where could I even get an interview? I had average step 1 scores, but I had like 1 or 2 publications. It's not like it is now. Everybody has all this stuff. So I got a good little number of interviews from some decent programs. And so for me, it was all about numbers. I really wanted to do a lot of cataract surgery because I knew in my specific situation, that was what was relevant to me. But that's not everybody. Not everybody wants to do cataract surgery. There's a bunch of other stuff within ophthalmology. So how do you kind of evaluate and rank the programs that you go visit and interview at?
So that's such an important point and question. And we can all agree that 120 something programs in the country right now, they're all meeting ACGME requirements. They're all going to train you to be a qualified ophthalmologist, and they're all you're going to come out great no matter where you go. I think, to my mind, the most important thing is culture and fit. And do you fit in with the culture of this program? And that's also just piggybacking on the previous topic we were just talking about, away rotations. And I think an away rotation is such an important way to gauge that, see how the residents interact. How do the residents interact with each other? How do they interact with the attendings? What's the dynamic like in clinic when you're staffing with them? Are the residents afraid to approach the attending to ask for help, or vice versa? Is it more of a hand-holding program, or is it more of an autonomous program? And I think those are all very important points. And I mean, they all just boil down to what the culture of the program is, whether you fit in, and also, are people happy? do people look like they want to be there? And you might think, well, I mean, why wouldn't they? But you can tell so much from body language, from what people say, what people do, and you'll be surprised what you can gauge from people, how people carry themselves in the department. Even that's something I also made a point to pay attention to. How was the program director interacting with the residents? How were the residents interacting with their seniors? And all these things, I think, they play a role. And you could be at the best program in the world, but if you're not happy, I don't think you're going to be the best version of yourself. And that's also goes back to the first topic we talked about, which is staying true to yourself. And you want to be true to yourself. You want to be authentic. So you're going to match at a program where they like you for who you are. And it's going to make what's going to be a very grueling and at the same time rewarding 4 years that much more beneficial to you. And if I could just touch on the previous topic about the away rotations, I just wanted to talk from an IMG perspective. I think it's extremely important, especially for a foreign medical grad, because maybe some programs might view a foreign medical grad as an unknown quantity. They don't know how to gauge the quality of their medical school, which also makes the fact that step one is now pass-fail that much more daunting for people who don't come from quote unquote traditional top-tier schools. So going on these away rotations can kind of show a program that you can fit in, that you are somebody who gets the culture. You're somebody who's not going to be a problem. You're somebody who won't be so difficult to acclimatize to the culture there, for example. So I think it's such an effective way to kind of level the playing field and to show programs that there are more applicants beyond the quote unquote traditional bread and butter ones that you might get from your fancy big schools. So that's just my plug for that topic, but great questions all around. Thank you.
Rahul, I want you to react to that, and specifically the culture and fit, and like, you know, they're looking at you guys to be like, hey, how happy is Dr. Tonk and how happy is the colleagues? Are you doing the same thing? Are you being like, you know, how easy is this person to approach? Are they socially aware? Are they going to be a pain in the ass for the next 3 or 4 years? I mean, surely you guys are looking at culture and fit and attitude and all that, you know, when you're going through that.
Yeah, I think what I've learned as this process has gone on is how much more important the who is than the what. And that's true for both sides. So as an applicant, when you're assessing a program, you know, numbers, of course, in the residency program perspective, very important to hit a certain number of cataracts and core competencies and so forth. But above a certain level, you know, I would trade off pound for pound, great mentorship, great culture, great family, than doing your 301st cataract at a certain institution. I just think that if you set up with the right mentors, they're going to be with you for the rest of your career. And they're going to teach you things beyond the technicalities of a surgery and even the technicalities of a clinical exam. They'll just teach you an approach to life, a way to balance your work and life, a way to integrate research with a career. Even if you're not particularly interested in research at this stage in your career, maybe you'll find someone that sparks something in you. Mentorship is really what it's about. And so as you assess programs, make sure that everybody's happy. Of course, residents are tired frequently. And so a lot of times you might not get the best initial impression from residents that are post-call, but generally speaking, you can sleuth it out and you can figure out, you know, who's tired, who's happy to be working hard, and who's just feeling like they're, you know, getting too much scut work on their plate. And then on the other side, for us on the program director side, 100% by the time you're at the interview stage, you know, we're not looking at the CV as much. And what we're really looking for is the person. And when the going gets tough and I'm, let's say, at home and I've got a private patient of mine that shows up in our clinical emergency room, and the resident, you know, is giving me a call at 2 a.m. say, Dr. Tonk, we've got your patient here. I just need to know that that person has done a good quality exam, that I can trust what they say, that they're clear of thought, that they can present themselves well, that they are reliable in that they will sign out that patient appropriately, the appropriate staff member to make sure they do follow up back with me. Same is true with how we then see those people mature through their residencies. Are they going to be team players in their class cohort, but then when they become senior residents, are they going to stick it out and stay late when they're on buddy call with first year residents and teach the first years what they learned, what people did for them? Are they going to pay it forward? Are they going to become educators? It's all about the person at the end of the day, especially once you're at the interview stage. So even if you don't, I'm thinking about the introverts that are listening to this that may not know how to present themselves in the best way and be outgoing and come across great in an away rotation. That's not what it's all about. I mean, if you can find somebody to speak to your authenticity, your trustworthiness, your reliability, if you can find a way or a vignette or a story that conveys that in a powerful way, concentrate on that story, craft that story so that when you get the interview question, tell me about yourself, which is coming, guys. It's coming. You're going to get that interview question if you haven't heard it already. Just don't be surprised like it's the first time someone's asked you that question. Have some concise answer that's going to convey to me that when the going gets tough, you're going to be on the ball. And it's not really that complicated.
Whenever that resident does call you at 2 a.m., do they ever ask, like, what's that house music playing in the background? Do they ever ask what club you're at? I know in Miami.
It is Miami after all, so they find me a club space over here.
There's like a secret place to take call Miami nightclubs.
Likely they're going to find me with my young kids, crying in the background. I'll still be awake one way or the other.
Brent, what do you think?
I mean, I agree. Rahul laid it out really well in terms of what the hospitals and what the programs are looking for in their applicants. The biggest challenge is actually eliciting that information and eliciting those character attributes that we really want to know about. And so it's really not as much on the hospital to draw out that information as it is on the applicant to present themselves in that honest and that very clear way. One of the things which in a minute I want to bounce over back to our recent matchees is how much time did you spend preparing certain questions and certain answers so that you are ready to go when they come up, because there are those classic ones that Rahul mentioned, but you just gotta have your answer ready to rock and roll to really keep the ball moving and keep things moving along. And then otherwise, in terms of just preparing for that day, I think having your general list of questions, having your vignettes, having your talking points, I think are going to prepare you so there's not as many stumbling blocks. The last thing that I would really mention when we talk about intangibles, you are in the top whatever percent by the time you make it to the actual interview. And so the entire interview day is that working interview. It's that working relationship building. And so not only are the applicants interacting with each other and building their friendships and their colleague connections, but we also are watching to see how the applicants are interacting with all the other individuals at the hospital. And I know this may be cliche to say, but the first person that we go and ask about the applicants after they leave at the end of the day is we go and we talk to the secretaries, we talk to the tour guides, we talk to the guy at the front door who opened it for them. And we want to know who was rude, who was a jerk, because those people immediately are going in the paper shredder. And after that, then we take the remaining people and we start considering them. So be nice to people, play fair. It's a small sandbox. But I'd bounce it back over to Mike and Camila. How much time did y'all spend preparing some of those stock answers, but the ones that were really pure and ready to rock and roll for your interview day?
Yeah, so I mean, I lost count of the amount of times I practiced, but I think aside from practicing the main standard questions like tell me about yourself, I think especially with things being virtual now and sometimes nonverbal cues not really being fully appreciated, I think you really want to focus on how you're delivering your question, your answer as well. And it's not so much about what you say, it's about how you say it. And at the same time, you want to come off prepared. So I know I'm kind of contradicting myself, but prepared, but at the same time, you don't want to seem robotic. So I basically had every item on my application. I had at least 1 or 2 bullet points ready to go about what I was going to talk about, because the last thing you wanted to do was freeze on the spot. Obviously, there were going to be occasional questions that kind of stumped you, but I think, and you can also correct me on this, but I think the interviewer also is kind of seeing how you're responding to questions, if they may be kind of coming out of left field, or like if they've thrown you a curveball. They want to see if you're easily flustered, or if it's something, how are you going to react to it? So I definitely practiced questions like tell me about yourself, had things prepared for every single item on my application. Another thing that I think maybe some people don't realize before going through the process is you get asked a lot about your hobbies. And the last thing you want to do is not know what to talk about with your hobbies. It's really an opportunity for you to let your guard down, quote unquote, and really talk about the things that you're comfortable with. And odds are the person who's asking you about these hobbies also probably shares those hobbies as well. So it's your opportunity to show how you are socially, and again, just make sure you're prepared whatever you have on there, which goes without saying. I'm sure Camila can also attest to this.
Mike brought up so many great points too. I have a lot of thoughts, so I'll keep them organized. But really, when approaching the interview questions, so even I just went and checked on iguru.com. They have an awesome list of common questions. So of course, being prepared and not thinking of a robotic answer. Don't focus on memorizing answers to questions, but rather understand what the central theme is that you're trying to get across. Think of your experiences, what you'd want to say, responding to questions, things like tell me about yourself, why ophthalmology, strengths, weaknesses, tell me something about yourself that's not on the application. There are so many, you can look them up online. But the most important thing is not what you say, but how you make people feel. I think one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou is, in a sense, people may forget what you did or what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So I think just at your core, being honest with who you are, being authentic and connecting with your interviewer, and not being afraid to let your passion shine through, especially during virtual interview season, that can be a challenge. So I think trying to be as enthusiastic while being honest to yourself as possible, it helps convey your passion. Little things like practicing looking into the camera to make eye contact with your interviewer, it makes a big difference. Your body language, like Mike said, your tone. Essentially, you just want to leave an emotional imprint on your interviewer. And it takes two people, right, to connect. So you, just as much as your interviewer is trying to connect with you, you want to connect with your interviewer. So just share what makes you so passionate, why you're so excited to be applying into ophthalmology, and you'll have a great experience.
Yeah, I think that's super important, and I think it's important to be prepared if what you think is going to be a hit turns out to be a flop. So you may have some I have several one-liners that I'll break out from time to time when I'm trying to manipulate someone into liking me. I remember when I was doing my little statement, you want to kind of stand out because I read all those statements and I'm like, gosh, what can I think of that's true and authentic and real that immediately would set me apart? And like one of the first lines that I did was something about my family history in medicine. And one of the cool things is like one of my great uncle, Dr. Ira Bush, was this guy who was a doctor in Texas, and he actually crossed the border during the Mexican Insurrection Army and became the personal physician of Pancho Villa. And he wrote a book about his exploits called Gringo Doctor, which you can go get. It's my Uncle Ira on the front cover in full regalia with sword. And I thought, wow, that's powerful and that's so different. And so I put that at the top. And I remember one of the programs that I went to, the first thing the guy said is, "You ready?" He goes, "Yes, I read this. So what you're saying is your ancestors are traitors?" Your ancestors are basically traitors that joined the Mexican Insurrection Army. And I was like, oh crap, I didn't think about it like that. So they laughed. They weren't being mean-spirited, but I wasn't ready. I didn't think about it like that. I thought about like, oh, this is cool. Nobody else has this on their application. So be careful. Think about if they turn it on a dime, and then going towards what Brent said about the people at the front desk I remember literally I think I did like 13 interviews, which I think was a decent number back then. And I went on 13 of them, and I wrote a thank you note specifically to the front desk person. So the secretary that was like, welcome. I took their name, and I literally had individual cards. I put them in a FedEx mailer with like 4 or 5 different things. All the people that interviewed me, the program director, and the secretaries, like everybody. And I don't know how many people did that. I don't know if that's a thing, but I did that. Maybe that helped me. Maybe they saw right through it. I don't know. But that was sort of my tactic. So we have about 5 minutes left. Dr. Tonk, I want you to, is there anything that we haven't covered? Is there anything that you want to bring up?
I mean, we've covered so much about, I think, preparing the application, personal statement, CV, We talked about the interview process, preparing for an interview, how to conduct yourself in an interview. One thing that frequently comes up is how to utilize your supporters and your support network. And I will share briefly what I think, but I'm curious to know what our co-panelists think about how they utilize their support network, because I think that is so important in the field as small as ours. I will say, generally speaking, my advice is to highlight, let's say, a small number of programs, 1 to 3 programs that you are particularly or uniquely interested in and well suited for. And I would reach out to whomever may have personal insight into that program, or a colleague that is on faculty of that program, whatever it may be, and have them send out a quick email, text, or phone call, letting them know that your application is coming as they review applications in time for the interview invites to go out. Some people talk about sending those things out after the interview is done. You know, that's a little bit of gamesmanship, right? You interview at a bunch of places and then you finally figure out what your top 3 are, and then you send out these things. And I think that that's a different way of looking at it. In my perspective, by the time you get your rank list set and get that machinery together to send those out, it's gotten a little bit late, and the program is probably likely to have already had their internal rank list meetings. So you may be bumped up and down, but it would at that point be at the discretion of the program director rather than the committee. And that's a harder call to make the larger an institution you have. If you have a large institution with a big committee that's looking at residents together, it's very hard for one person to make that shift. So I like, if those things are going to go out, they'll stay in your file post-interview, of course. So, you know, send out 1 or 2 or 3 if you feel the need before the interview, just to make sure that we don't sleep on your application as we consider whom to extend an interview invite to. Don't overdo it. You know, of course, we don't want too many of these to go out and for anything to seem inauthentic. So if it's just one program, just send out 1 letter or 1 email. But that's my little bit of advice, and I'm curious how the others manage that.
Yeah, Camila, maybe I'll give you kind of the last word here. You prepared a lot of thoughts about tonight. You want to react to that and kind of take us home?
Absolutely, would love to. That's so many excellent points, Dr. Tonk. Something you mentioned about reaching out to a few programs that you're genuinely interested in as an applicant. I think that's so valuable. I think you shoot your shot as long as you're honest with what you're saying. And if you are emailing these programs, my advice is to really individualize that email. Tell them why you're so passionate, why you're excited about that program, and let them know your exact reasons so it's not too broad and generic. And really, Mike, everyone here has brought up so many amazing points of leaning on your support network. One of my favorite things about this amazing field of ophthalmology is how interconnected everyone is, how willing and excited people are to support one another and support the next generation of future ophthalmologists. This is a vibrant community of remarkable people. I remember going through, even during the COVID pandemic, and I started reaching out to ophthalmologists through social media, Twitter. I reached out to one of my mentors, Dr. Rob Melendez, through Instagram, and he was willing to mentor me throughout the process. Mike and I reached out to each other. We met through Med Twitter, and we joined Young MD Connect, and we brought it full circle, meeting at Millennial Eye this past year, where we got to meet you too, Dr. Williamson. So I just encourage you to support one another. I think the more you give, the more you get. So this isn't a competitive environment. This is a supportive one. So I think take care of one another, really lean on your co-applicants and share information, and reach out to mentors who are supporting you along the way. And don't be afraid to reach out to ophthalmologists and residents in the field to ask about programs. We're more than happy to help.
And I'll probably end with, wherever you do end up, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. I think where I was like 3rd or 4th on my list. And I was kind of bummed, but man, did it turn out to be the best thing ever. And I bet you that's what's going to be for everyone listening to this. If you don't get your first or second thing, just know that there's a reason for that. And you're still going to be an ophthalmologist. One of my favorite Steve Dell quotes is that the worst day in ophthalmology is still better than the best day in internal medicine, which is so true for all of you PGOY ones who are doing that internal medicine thing. Could you imagine doing that like the rest of your life? Oh my God! Shout out to my internal medicine people. I'm like 82% kidding. We love you guys, but seriously, we're biased. So you guys are gonna be fine no matter what. I hope that you take home a few things from Brent and Rahul and Camila and Mike. And we want to thank you all for listening to this episode of Survive and Thrive.
Thank you for listening to Ophthalmology Off the Grid's Survive and Thrive series. And thank you to our guests, Drs. Finklea, Tonk, Albo, and Zein, for joining the show. Until next time.